race. Let me take you round.
You're ready. Let's take things nice and easy. Girl, there ain't nothing else for me. I got to feel you and I come over. Yeah, can't you feel the vibe is right? For us to get it on tonight. Stop wasting time. Maybe it's the last chance to get the last dance. Come over. Yeah, can't you feel the vibe is right? For us to get it on tonight. Stop wasting time. Maybe it's the last chance to get the last dance. Come over.
Give me one more kiss before you go.
I want pleasure.
And I come over, yeah. Can't you feel the vibe is right? For us to get it on tonight. Stop wasting time. Maybe it's the last chance to get the last dance. Come over, yeah. Can't you feel the vibe is right? For us to get it on tonight. Stop wasting time. Maybe it's the last chance.
Hello and welcome to Silverstone for the 4th Eurosport Super Racing weekend. Quite possibly you're hearing us, hopefully so. It's beautiful sunny conditions in Northamptonshire for the FIA GT Championship Superpole, which will be coming up in just a moment. We'll be bringing you action from this afternoon's Formula Renault Euro Cup race. But first, let's take a look at the track.
Hi, my name's Jamie Campbell-Walter. Welcome to Silverstone for my home race. Let me take you around the circuit for a lap in the Lister Storm.
Okay, here we are for the start of the lap. Up to the start-finish straight, 4th gear, 5th gear, into Copse. The end of this straight's my favourite corner. Down 1 gear to 4th. 110 on the apex, back on the power. Up to my second favourite corner, Beckett's and Maggots. Turning in flat out. Very bumpy there, 115 miles an hour. Bit of understeer here, and the right-hander. Now on the power. Lots of bumps there as well, you can see. 4th gear. Okay, just turning my lights on because of the back marker up ahead. This is the infamous hanger straight. 6th gear, 165 miles an hour. Into Stowe. This is where Michael Schumacher went off at the British Grand Prix 2 years ago. Bit of understeer on the apex. 4th gear. On the brakes. Car goes very light here under braking. Turning in 50 miles an hour, slowest part of the circuit. Into club. Very oversteery here normally. Yeah, there we go. Now back on the power. Goes on forever this corner. 4th gear. 150 miles an hour to Abbey. Braking at the road on the right. 2nd gear. Nice chicane this. Into the dip. Back on the power. Over the curb. Into bridge. 4th gear, just a little lift, feather and power. Down to 3rd, into the stadium section. This is a very understeery first corner. Back on the brakes, 2nd gear. Smooth it all down. Here we go into Luffield, the last corner. Trying to keep the curb on the car on the curb on the right. Now on the power coming out, a little bit of oversteer. Into Woodcote, 3rd gear, 4th gear. Crossing the line. The 1 minute 49, which hopefully puts us fastest.
Well, busy lap for Jamie Campbell-Walter and busy for all of these guys around Silverstone. Now this is the British Grand Prix circuit, the fast and technical combination of high-speed sweepers and the tight infield section, the Priory, Brooklands and Luffield section that ends the lap, and difficult to set the cars up to be perfect in both types of corner, but certainly the British teams will have had plenty of experience in this FIA GT Championship of racing here, and they will hope to fare well when we come back live with Superpole. racing weekend package. Good afternoon and welcome to the beautiful sunny Silverstone. My name's Martin Haven. Alongside me in our air-conditioned booth, we've got the back door open, David Leslie. David, fantastic conditions. For the first time all year, the drivers actually baking in the sunshine, and after 3 weekends of rain and cold and snow, now they're whinging about cockpit temperatures. Can you believe it?
You can't make drivers happy whatever you do for them. We've got the most wonderful weekend here at Silverstone. The sun is really shining, it's really warm, and it's a fantastic weekend. What you need to do is get yourself out of the house, into the countryside, and come here to Silverstone and watch what will be a very exciting 3-hour race. And the rest of the package, of course, double super touring action and super productions on Sunday. If you are at home, then never mind the garden, never mind the FA Cup final. I'm sure you're not watching that sort of rubbish. Get yourself down to Silverstone. It is absolutely wonderful spectating weather. I can't imagine any better conditions than this. Well, the drivers, of course, have had Friday, 2 hour-and-a-half free practice sessions to get dialed into the track, and they've had their first 45-minute qualifying session for the GT cars as well. And the fastest 6 NGT and GT class cars in the GT Championship are now going off into this top 12 runoff, that is Superpole. First man away is the slowest of the NGT cars. That's Bruno Eichmann, the Swiss. Not the slowest of all of them, you understand, the slowest of the top 6 fast ones. I didn't really... We'll do that again when we come to edit it, and I'll explain it slightly better. Eichmann then the 6th fastest of the drivers. Now, like all of the other guys, bar one, he is in a Porsche 996 GT3R, or 911 GT3R as we called them last year. Not quite sure what the difference is. Nobody's yet been able to point out exactly where the profound difference is. Porsche just using their road car nomenclature rather than the slightly older 911 name, which denotes the car. And the format here, of course, is the driver comes out of the pit lane for a sighting lap to warm the car up and warm the tyres up. And then he has, at the end of this lap, starts the clocks on his flying lap. And as he does so, the next driver in line will come out for his sighting lap out from the pits as well, to try and hopefully present a continuous stream of flying laps from the cars. And as we said before, those of you who aren't familiar with the format of Superpole, these runs will determine the 12 places on the grid no matter what else happens in qualifying. The front 12 will be from the Superpole cars. So whether the remaining GT cars are quicker than these Superpole runners from MGT or not, they will still start behind them, which always opens up the pause a little bit at the beginning of the race, both for the faster drivers behind and for the NGT cars in front. Now, David, we've seen in the wet conditions that have prevailed for the last 3 weeks, racing weekends, that the NGT cars with their 410, 420 odd horsepower have not been at that much of a disadvantage with regard to the bigger cars, but here they're certainly not going to have any chance of matching the times. Certainly not in this weather here at Silverstone. Very long circuit, very fast circuit, and we can see them now just coming around the last corner to start their flying lap. There they go across the start and finish line now, and the clock will start for his time for the lap. But these NGT cars certainly are not going to get anywhere near the bigger, faster 700 horsepower cars. They're just haven't got the BHP to match them. In the last 3 weekends, as you said, it's rained a lot and it's been very, very cold. At Bruno, we were talking about -6 degrees at one point during that racing weekend there. And that all allowed the slower cars to be able to use their less power to try and keep the cars on the circuit and get that extra speed and match the faster GT cars. This weekend, they don't have those wet weather conditions. We've got this beautiful weekend here at Silverstone. So the bigger cars are going to be able to use their power to their full. And while these guys are still doing their best, the bigger GT cars will just be that much further ahead. So we're going to see 2 very distinct times here, one for the NGTs and a very, very different one for the GT cars this time.
And of course, the weather set fair for the weekend as a whole, so hopefully Sunday the conditions won't prevent the faster cars behind them having a decent run through the NGT cars to get to the top of the field. Now, Bruno Eichmann, the Swiss driver of this 51 car, the Labre competition Porsche. Of course, Labre competition won the NGT category last year, and the 2 drivers, well, Christophe Bouchou particularly, moving up into the Viper. Now, wide line there coming down into bridge. I have to say, say I've never seen anybody use so much grass coming down into Bridge Bend. That's a very quick corner. That was very wide out of Abbey. We saw him lock a break going into the Beckett's S's. So Bruno Eichmann certainly not hanging around, and I think for the first time in Superpole, David, really good conditions to have a major go with the car, and we're already seeing that right from the word go.
Yeah, it is fantastic. Up till now it's been so cold and so wet. These guys have had to tiptoe around the circuits. We've seen them when they go out on their sighting lap, their first lap out, have to weave vigorously around the circuit to try and put some heat into the tyres, because it has been so cold and so damp out there. First time at Silverstone this weekend, we've got the sun, it is shining. You can see when they go out on their warming up lap, their sighting lap, they're not weaving around as much as they had done in the previous 3 races, and the tyres are getting the heat into them before they start. So on this one lap round this rather long circuit, they've been able to get the tyres up to temperature, and as they come round this last corner now, starting on the flying lap for Fabio Babini here, then they've got the tyres up to the temperature they want, so they've got the grip. They can go into this first corner coppice through there, being able to really lean on the car and try very, very hard to get a really good quick lap time, rather than the varying lap times we've had in the past 3 super racing weekends, where we sometimes had as much as 6 or 7 seconds spread across the cars because of the different things. Now we see again the front wheel locking in that middle of that Beckett's complex there. So these Porsches obviously all seem to do that, so there's a possibility that during the race, if they do it often enough, they could end up flat spotting and puncturing a tyre, which will cause them even more problems during this 3-hour race we're looking forward to tomorrow.
Well, there you see on the split time, Babini just a fraction behind again, trail braking all the way into Stowe. Stowe used to be, in the Formula 1 car at least, an awesome 180 mile an hour approach into a 180 degree, well, a 90 degree right-hander. Now it's much tighter, and now the slowest part of the corner coming of the circuit coming out of the Vale. We saw with Jamie Campbell-Walsh at the beginning of the show just how busy it is, and again you saw Babini earlier on as he was coming through Maggots and into Beckett's, really fighting with the steering wheel, the car bouncing around all over the place. These relatively still softly sprung GT3Rs, certainly compared to cars like the Lister Storm, really, they can ride the curves, but they also tend to throw the car around a little bit. Now the car ahead of him, just on its sighting lap, so shouldn't get in the way. Babini nice and neat into Priory, then little squirt down to Brooklands. Now this is the slower of the pair of left-handers, and then all very hard to control all that horsepower. We say only 410 brake horsepower. Well, don't forget that's about 300 more than your average 2-litre family saloon, so it's still an awful lot. You're talking 4 Ford Mondeos under your right foot. Is plenty to control at 60 miles an hour coming out of Brooklands. Across the line he comes in, 155.243, just 33 one-thousandths of a second slower. So Babini in second spot at the moment. And we've seen Bruno Eichmann's car pull off. Babini now continues on his slow down lap, hopefully not too slowly, as coming up to line is Germany's Wolfgang Kaufmann. A new colour scheme on the Freisinger Porsches. Notice they're still largely white, but they've got these little flashes of colour on. The red is the 57 car. The 58 car has flashes of blue. The Russians in the 59 car, it's all white as it's a brand new shell. Their last one too badly damaged after Magny-Cours. And Kaufmann really pushing very hard indeed, gets out of shape through Maggots, and that is going to scrub the lap. Well, it'll give us plenty of time to enjoy the shark's teeth they've drawn around the front end of the car to sort of re-identify them. But Kaufmann really pushing hard there, and David, it's so often the case with Maggots and Beckett's is that it just draws you in. Copse, the preceding corner, is pretty much flat out, then over the little left-hand rise down towards Maggots, and it just welcomes you with opening arms. Here he's come in 5 miles an hour too fast, bounced it on the curbs. Well, he's held the moment-ish, but that's pretty much the end of his attempt there.
Yeah, he just arrived there just that little bit too quick. We've seen when he caught the curb, the car started to bounce. These cars are quite soft. I was talking to Johnny Morland earlier, and he's in the car we've still to see, the number 77 car, sharing with Luca Riccatelli, and he was saying that these cars, because of a rule change, it's slightly different in this championship to another championship which he races a similar car in. He said these cars are just that bit more lurid. They actually do move around an awful lot more because they're just that bit higher off the ground because of the difference in rules regulations, what he's used to. And we can see as this car went into that complex at Maggots there that it did really bounce around, and you can see the suspension moving up and down, and he did very well just to hang on there. So having drawn them shark's teeth on there, we're hoping that it's more for trying to get forward in people rather than for the grass it was aiming at so far.
Yeah, the car bit back there. So poor old Wolfgang, well, I'm sure he'll be really kicking himself with disappointment over that, because he will have fancied his chances here at a circuit where he traditionally goes pretty well. '55 car of Michel Neugarten coming to the line, the Belgian driver racing for the Perspective Racing team, and going considerably better here than they've managed to in qualifying so far. And Neugarten with that familiar helmet livery, you'll see it as you get the shot from the left-hand side of the car, an exact replica of Nelson Piquet, the Grand Prix driver's helmet, except not in red, but in a sort of turquoisey colour. And again, you can see how busy the driver is here. David, so often you see the little band of white tape on the top of the steering wheel to allow the driver to sort of see the centre line in it, and that's a really good indication. Even if you can't quite see the hands, you normally get that flash of white as he saws at the wheel. And again, although he held that a little tidier than Kaufmann, the thing's still really moving around a lot, and quite a lot of that, I'm sure, in these cars is because of that rear-mounted engine hanging out at the back behind the tyres.
It is. The cars have got to be relatively soft to get them to handle at some point, but they really do look as they're far too soft to go around this circuit, Silverstone circuit. Certainly my experience of this circuit is you want to make the car as stiff as possible, and the cars we've watched so far, this one, the Neugarten car, and previously the Kaufmann car, they are definitely moving around up and down all over the place. I would think these guys really need to do a little bit more work. They had their long running yesterday to get used to the cars and get them set up to go around their circuit, but these cars certainly do not look as though they're handling terribly well. They are really bouncing about on this circuit. It is a very smooth circuit here at Silverstone. It is the Grand Prix circuit we're watching, and we've seen the Formula 1 cars on it. They look fine, but these cars really are bouncing around, and that's without hitting the curbs too hard, because the curbs here certainly are not high. They're pretty flat and pretty smooth. There's a couple of them, but most of them you can run over and you wouldn't normally not notice it, but these cars are certainly suffering at the moment.
Well, you can see there exactly what David was saying. In the inside of Luffield, the curb's very flat, and on the exit as well, plus a little bit of reinforcement under the grass there as you run out onto the start-finish straight. And coming up to complete his lap, 1:54.783 for Michel Neugarten, and that is the fastest so far. So Neugarten in the Perspective Racing car going strongly, and this will be the last of our Porsches. This is the car that Johnny Molam shares this weekend. Dieter Questa, the normal co-driver for Luca Riccatelli, who's at the wheel at the moment, is indisposed due to illness, and Molam was in fact in a restaurant at Le Mans at the weekend, last weekend, during the test weekend, where he's driving another car, and got a phone call from the team saying, are you free next weekend for Silverstone? Yes, I am. Would you like to drive? Yes, I would. Thank you very much indeed. So he finds himself, as David has explained, in a slightly different version of the car that he's racing in the American Le Mans Series. And quick call to Herbert Amfer of Porsche, A, to clear it, and B, just to check that the team were who they said they were. And Johnny has found himself picking up a ride at a circuit, of course, that he's very keen indeed to race on and to race well on. Now, this car, though, the Porsche, although the 77 Red Bull car has largely been the fastest of the cars in the Porsche field in the NGT class, may be up against it a little bit against the Ferrari that won last time out at Magny-Cours. We'll have to wait and see, looking with interest when the Ferrari comes round to see just how it compares. The Red Bull car looks pretty much as bouncy as any of the other Porsches. I wonder if the Ferrari, by dint of being a completely different make, will have a different setup and be more like a skateboard and less like a feather bed that the Porsches appear to be at the moment.
I think it might be. The Ferrari is more of a mid-engine rather than a rear-engine car like the Porsche is, so it could be. But I think personally this one, no, there is bouncing a lot there. I thought earlier on going into the Maggots complex it wasn't bouncing as much, but that's proved me wrong going into the corner at Abbey there. It's still bouncing. I know Johnny was saying that was one of the problems where it was moving around much more than he was expecting, and he was trying to work with the team in the car to try and make it that little bit stiffer to try and stop that from happening. Maybe they've managed to cure it on one corner, but certainly not in all of the corners. Certainly a nicer, tighter line around Brooklands. So this does look like quite a good, clean, tidy lap, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go quickest.
Yeah, I was going to suggest perhaps that some of the reason it's not bouncing so much is that Riccatelli has got it more under control from the start and is driving neater and tidier than the others. Well, 54.204 by half a second and a fraction over. David Leslie's prediction is entirely right. Riccatelli does go fastest, so it's Riccatelli from Neugarten, then Eisman, Babini and Kaufmann, whose lap was 3.5 seconds slower than the others after that whoops at Maggots. And here is our final and fastest NGT runner from qualifying, on board with Christian Pescatore. Through Copse, flat in a Mini, not flat in a Ferrari. And then over the rise, this little left-handed kink. No lift there. Now into Maggots, just lifting up to the apex and then heading into the Beckett's complex, which is a little slower in the middle here. And this is the critical part, getting the exit onto the hangar straight. Again, riding on the curbs. And using that fingertip gear change that the road cars, of course, possess to flick the car up the semi-automatic gearbox. Well, 37.273. So that's a good start for Christian Pescatore. Again, down through the veil, you can see the vibration in the car, the sort of dragon's teeth effect on the curbs, on the higher curbs, and you'll see that again if he runs too high over the curbs at Abbey. The exit to Abbey's got a very heavy serrated curb as he comes out and then heading up towards Chapel Curve. Of course, Silverstone's circuit changing over the years, and the Abbey chicane, one of those changes to slow the cars down. This used to be a flat-out blast all the way up straight to Woodcote long before the bridge was built, through Bridge Bend, then hard on the brakes, down a couple of gears, and he's really pushing this car very hard indeed. You can see how well he's working the steering, and Christian Pescatore in the Ferrari pushing very hard indeed. Pescatore coming round to complete the lap, and the Ferrari looking set to take the class pole. It was fastest in practice, there should be no change why it's not quickest. 1:53.644 for Christian Pescatore. He does go fastest of all by half a second from Luca Riccatelli. The Red Bull Porsche will start the second NGT class. Well, I understand you're having problems with your pictures. Apologies for that. We start now with our GT cars. This is the number 5 machine. Mimo Schiattarella at the helm of the Raffinelli team's Ferrari 550 Maranello. So from an NGT Ferrari to the GT class car. Engine in the rear in the 360 Modena and up front in the 550 Maranello. And Mimo Schiattarella heading out and onto the hangar straight. Schiattarella down to Stowe, braking hard, braking very hard indeed. Stowe, well, what a corner it would have been if they'd had the old variety of Stowe still for this big front-engine behemoth of the track. Now in the Vale and down to the exit, right down into second gear. Some 50 miles an hour or so, and then 800 horsepower kicks in, and the driver tries desperately to control it without burning up the tyres. Now, of course, in Superpole, that's not a problem, but in the race, it's going to be very, very easy indeed to slide these cars out of there, and that's just going to burn up the tyres. Out of the Abbey chicane. See how sunny it is outside, the onboard in the dark of the cockpit, having trouble discerning the road. The driver's eyes, of course, will be acclimatised to it, so as he comes down into Priory, a better chance now. Down into Brooklands, drops the cog. Not too low down the gearbox, wants to control the wheel spin without the car coming right off the cams. And then into Luffield, seems to take forever this corner, 480 degrees plus. Looking for the speaker stand before the grandstand as your marker to start aiming the car out, and then skimming up by the markers for the pit wall as you come across the line. Mimo Schiattarella, no surprise at all, goes fastest of all the NGT cars behind him by some 3.2 seconds. And still 5 more GT machines to come. And this is the next of them, the Lister Storm of Julian Bailey. Now, Julian Bailey driving in some well, I won't say discomfort, more like agony. Not sure whether he'll be able to do a stint in the car on Sunday. And the reason for that, well, it's a trivial one. Julian walked into, unsighted, a drawer standing out of a tool chest and caught himself very badly in the ribs on the left-hand side of his chest. He's in a lot of pain here. That was just this morning. And here at Silverstone, with a number of fast right-hand corners, really working those ribs very hard indeed. Now, because of a problem with the starter motor in the qualifying session, Nicholas Springer, the nominated second driver of the car, has yet to qualify. He'll have to do that in the final 15 minutes of practice here after the Superpole run, assuming the number 2 Lister Storm is still in one piece. They also brought in Dave Warnock. Now, Dave Warnock was last year's British GT Championship runner-up to Callum Lockie, and Warnock's raced a Lister Storm for the last 3 years in Britain. Experienced driver, knows the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone well enough as well. Now, he won't get a chance to qualify today, but depending on the fitness of Bailey, he may yet have to try and qualify the car in tomorrow's morning warm-up, so that there are actually 2 drivers who are fit and qualified for the number 2 machine. Meanwhile, of course, Bailey, well, he can hang on in there for one flying lap, and he will do his level best to put the car as far up the grid as possible, so that if he is driving it or anyone else, it's got a chance come tomorrow's race. And you can see the difference in pace between these cars and the NGT cars, and the Lister Storm, David, riding very much more flat than any of the NGT cars we've seen, but of course these things are much more highly developed than the closer to production NGT cars, and you pretty much expect that from a purebred racing machine like the Lister.
Yes, that's the big difference, is the NGT cars are more of a production car, so they have much more movement with the suspension, etc., where these cars, the GT cars, they've taken a production car, yes, but they've done a lot of work to it and made it much more like a racing car. Much more like a racing car suspension, much harder, much stiffer, and you can see when it goes around the corners it sits very flat. It does turn into the corners, it does get to the apex of the corners, and it's an amazing amount of grip, and does go around very, very quickly, and puts a lot of G-forces onto your body as you're going around the corners. And these are the things that's going to cause Julian a lot of discomfort should he be able to carry on this weekend and actually do the race tomorrow. So I was speaking to him just before we started this, and he was saying he's going to have to simply take a few more painkillers, and off he goes out there and do his absolute best. And looking at what he did there, he did a 49.566 to put him quickest so far, some 0.8 of a second quicker than the Ferrari. He's doing a very good job out there considering the pain he's in.
Well, the Ferrari then down into second place at the moment. Of course, it's unlikely necessarily to stay that way. We still have 4 cars to come, and this is the first of them. Anthony Kumpen, the Belgian driver in the number 10 Paul Belmondo Viper. And again, you can see that the increased aerodynamic grip that these cars have and the better suspension means that Kumpen's much tidier going there into Maggots and into Beckett's, and a much tidier line out onto the hangar straight. Certainly, compared to the NGT cars, much less working at the wheel. These cars have got much better grip, but again, compared to the Lister, it's still a much more softly sprung car, even in full dry and full hard setup, which Silverstone demands. The Lister really can be fine-tuned into a real roller skate, and as you mentioned earlier, David, a very flat playing surface here at Silverstone, a very level track, and that really does reward a rock-hard setup.
Yeah, most of the circuits that these cars visit during the year are Grand Prix circuits. Certainly we've had Monza was a Grand Prix circuit, and Magny Cours, and we've also been to Brno in the Czech Republic. Now, while that not be a Formula 1 Grand Prix, they do have motorcycle Grand Prix there, and we go to the best circuits, so these cars do have some fantastic surfaces in which to race on. So far they've been rather cold and wet, but this one, sun's shining, it does look wonderful out there. You can see the sun glistening off the highly painted, highly polished bodywork of these cars, and extremely colourful as well. As you can see, this blue and yellow Paul Belmondo car with a FIA sponsorship going around here towards the end of the lap, and we'll see just how well he does with against Julian Bailey. And there he goes quickest on a 49.10, some half a second faster than Julian.
Jamie Campbell-Walter in the number 1 Lister Storm, third fastest in qualifying, despite carrying 90 kilos of penalty weight for his success so far this season. Well, he is starting his lap now with the onboard camera, and again through Copse Corner the first of the Silverstone bends, and then heading down into this all-important Maggotts and Beckett's complex, using a little bit of curb on the way in there, but again the Storm riding it nicely, and then powering on to the Hangar Straight. This is the longest straight at Silverstone and has always been one of the fastest points on the track. Now down through the split, 35.474 to Kumpen's 35.221, so he's still got plenty of work to do, and just possible, I suppose, that Jamie will not be really hanging the tail out, but before the weekend started he was saying that he really wanted to try and get the Lister onto pole position, and Superpole is obviously the venue in which you harbour those aspirations. Well, the Belmondo car ahead of him will hopefully not be in the way. It's absolutely critical that the driver who's just completed his Superpole flyer is really vigilant, because if pole position is decided by a matter of hundredths of a second, just a couple of hundredths to take a slightly different line to negotiate a rival could make all the difference, and potentially you could really spoil somebody else's lap, and then I'm sure there would be an awful large to do about it. Well, into this Priory and Brooklands section, and now through Luffield, and spectator banking all the way around the outside. Chasing 149.107 as he comes to line. Is going to be very close indeed. Jamie Campbell-Walter, 149.007, goes ahead by 1/10 of a second to the thousandth. It was very close indeed, but Jamie Campbell-Walter fastest of all now. Anthony Kumpen second, Julian Bailey third, Mimo Schiattarella fourth in the Ferrari. 2 to go. This is the first of them, and it's the number 3 Car Sport Holland machine of Mike Hazemans, and this car has been beset again here at Silverstone by problems. They've had, it seems, a slight recurrence of the fuel problem that put them out at Magny-Cours, turned into a fuel pressure problem, they thought, because of insufficient pump capacity. They've boosted up their fuel pump capacity, and it still hasn't quite cured the problem, or hadn't on Friday. Their team car number 4 machine, incidentally, broke a prop shaft on Friday, so it's been going less than smooth, but at least, as Twan Hazeman said, it's sunny here, which is a start. They didn't really like the snow very much at Brno, these highly modified Car Sport Vipers. Already, you can see him using all the road throughout the early part of the lap, and now on the return back from Stowe again through the Vale. You don't often see people kicking up the dust in the Vale, but Mike Hazemans is going to nail his colours to the mast all the way around Silverstone, and desperately working hard, isn't he, David, shooting for this pole position?
He is. He's trying very hard out there. He's using all the curbs, everything he can. And we can see, when we see a picture of the side of the car, every now and again you can see a flame shooting out the side of the car. That is just unburnt fuel that's coming out of there, so whatever he's done to the fuel pressure, he's obviously got it up and working now. He's got so much fuel going in, it's coming out of the exhaust without being burnt. And I'm sure they'll need to do something about that before the race, because this is a fuel economy race, so if they are burning it far too quickly, they'll have to do an extra stop over and above everybody else. So after this, they'll be trying to, we see it just then, the flames coming out the side of the car, and they'll have to try and get rid of that before the actual race. But he really is, he was quicker at the split, halfway around the circuit, and he certainly looks clean and tidy, and I would say this will end up being quickest again.
And maybe by some margin as well, 148.575, so 0.4 of a second, nearly half a second, 0.432 of a second to be absolutely precise. He goes quicker. Mike Hazemans has pole position, and the one man who could possibly unseat him is at the wheel of the 11 Belmondo Viper. Well, we saw how pleased Paul Belmondo looked with Anthony Kumpen's effort to seize pole 2 cars ago. Now Kumpen down in 3rd place. Can the Belmondo cars start 1st and 4th on the grid? Emmanuel Clerico, well, he's had plenty of high-performance experience, not only in these GT cars, but also in the Lamborghini Diablo Challenge, in which he's been racing as the pro in the Pro-Am driver lineup of his car. And Emmanuel Clerico needs little introduction to sports car fans, a very experienced and very quick competitor. The Viper across the line, and nice line using all of the exit at Copse. Copse Corner, as you come down with the pit wall on your right, not looking as fast as it really is. You get into it halfway around and find there's this huge corner on the exit, and really one of those corners where it looks are very deceptive. Beckett's likewise. A lot of the drivers saying at Silverstone, look at their great shot down the Hanger Straight, that because this is essentially an airfield, or was in the 40s, it's very wide, very open, and there are not many things close to the track to use as braking and sighting markers, and that can make it difficult, particularly if you're in traffic, to really get your lines right. Obviously no traffic here, but still, Clerico kicking up the dust on the inside there, using all that the circuit has to offer and a little more. Out of the Vale he comes, and heading off down on the run back towards the pits. Not too much elevation change here at Silverstone. The Vale has been dug down to be artificially slightly lower than the Hanger Straight that precedes it. But no great climbs and falls as you might expect on a former bomber circuit or a former bomber airfield. And little twitchy there coming out of Abbey. Gets it all straightened away before he gets into bridge. Through Priory, and then again stamping hard on the middle pedal, down a cog into Brooklands. Named, of course, after the pre-war home of British Motorsport, around in front of the BRDC suite, the British Racing Drivers Club. And under the watchful eye of race control, he comes to the line. 1:48.575 the time he was shooting for. He falls short. He's, in fact, only fourth fastest. And so the Belmondo cars have row 2 of the grid to themselves. They are 3rd and 4th on the grid, Kumpen ahead of Clerico. But pole position remains with the man who was most spectacular of all, in my opinion, and that's probably the way it should be in Superpole. Mike Hazemans in the Carsport Holland Viper, car number 3 on pole position by some 0.4 of a second from Jamie Campbell-Walter. And David, you have to balance their speed here against the fact that they were clearly using an awful lot of fuel to get that power, and Superpole is definitely one thing, race pace is definitely another.
Yes, it's totally different altogether. One is you've got to set the car up to go as quickly as possible for one lap, and the other one you've got to make it last 3 hours with the fuel economy in there as well. And while the Mike Hazemans car is on Superpole, done a fantastic job, very good to watch, terrific round this circuit here at Silverstone. I think that certainly what we've seen so far this year, they could stand a bit of a problem during the race to try and get that fuel consumption to last the whole of the 3 hours.
So we see the final Superpole contender coming back towards the pits, and Emmanuel Clerico in the end unable quite to find the boost that he needed in the Belmondo Viper to clinch pole. He was fastest in qualifying, but will start in 4th place on the grid. And them's the brakes in Superpole. It's a 12-car crapshoot, if you like, and just one lap counts. Doesn't matter what you did in the previous 45 minutes in qualifying, that's all to naught if you can't hook it up on the one vital flyer. And it's Mike Hazemans who has done that best. He really got everything there was out of the Carsport Holland Viper, and I'm sure that Father Tuan and the rest of the crew will be very, very happy with that performance. And of course, immediately the handshaking and back-patting is finished inside the garage here. They will be going back to thinking about the race, because while Superpole is for the drivers an exciting diversion, it is exactly that, a diversion from the main event, which is 3 hours around the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone, and that is all in the end that matters. Pole position is nice, but not half as nice as the top step of the podium with the champagne going off in your hand. Stay with us on Eurosport as we're back for more action from Silverstone and the Super Racing weekend in just a minute.